Hello, this is saxophonist Antonio Parker, and this is a conversation in jazz, where we are promoting jazz through telling the stories. Today, we are presenting part one of our two-part interview with vocalist and the executive director of the DC Jazz Festival, Miss Sunny Sumter. We ask you to subscribe to the channel, hit the bell icon so we can let you know when we are posting another video or going live. We also ask you to donate to our Cash App in order to support the channel and help us to produce future videos. Our Cash App is $Jazzology101. That's $Jazzology101. Thank you. Enjoy the video. Hi, I'm Antonio Parker, and this is a conversation in jazz. Today, we have the wonderful vocalist, for those of you who don't know, and the executive director of the DC Jazz Festival, the one and only, the lovely Miss Sunny Sumter. Sunny, how you doing?
I'm great, Antonio. Thank you for having me on the show.
It's an honor. It's my honor to have you here. I know three Sunnys. I know Sunny from Howard University, the student. I used to see you in the practice room doing your thing. I know Sunny, the band leader. You know, I've done a few gigs with you.
Yes, you did.
And I know Sunny, now the executive director of the DC Jazz Festival. All right. So one of your first albums is called Getting to Know You. Yes, I remember that. So in this first segment, we're going to get to know who Sunny Sumter is. So who is Sunny Sumter?
Depends on the decade, right? Based on what you just said. Really, a family. I'm more focused on family. I've always been all my life. I am a jazz advocate. I have been all of my life. And
oh, wow.
I've been a jazz advocate in training, even as a child with my grandmother. And then I really am strongly a DC advocate. I love DC.
So you're a Native Washingtonian?
I'm 1513 Morris Road Southeast in Ward 8.
You from Southeast?
I'm from Southeast. I'm from the area, yes.
Now, let me tell you something. I came to DC in 1987, and DC was called the murder capital.
Oh, my goodness.
We didn't dare venture into Southeast. We were scared on Howard's campus. We were scared to go off the campus, and we were in Northwest. But I didn't know you were from Southeast.
I'm from Southeast, and you know, DC has not always been like that. You know, there's so many times my uncles tell me about in the 50s and the 60s prior to the riots and growing up in DC, Chocolate City. It was really an extraordinary place where there were villages, communities, neighborhoods that were vibrant, alive. And I think when the crack epidemic really hit and the drug trade went along the East Coast, D.C. was one of the hardest hit cities. So, but there were other cities.
Yeah, I mean, I'm from Philly.
Right,
and
Philadelphia,
I
New
tell
York,
people,
Brooklyn.
we came up in a time, like, there wasn't people getting shot. People, they had gangs and they fought, but you got to live to.
That's right.
You know, it wasn't until the crack thing hit that things began to change, you know. So what was it like growing up in D.C. when you were coming up?
My mother worked for the State Department, and she worked 16 hours a day. And so as a small in my, formative years, 5, 6, 7, 8 years old, I spent time at the State Department running up and down the hallway. This is long before, 9/11 or anything like that. And so that was really a second home for us because my mom worked late hours. We went to Our Lady of Perpetual Help, St. Teresa's, Catholic school upbringing.
You went to Catholic school?
I went to Catholic school.
Okay, I went to Catholic school, St. Ignatius, Philadelphia. Is that St. Ignatius? Okay, so we got a lot in common.
That's right.
Okay.
And so, we did most of the things that we did was families focused. I knew some people in the neighborhood, but we really spent a lot of our times indoors. And then I went and I moved in with my grandmother. At one point, several of us did, and my grandmother raised me. But D.C. was where I actually thought when I lived on Morris Road that was all D.C.
Wow.
I didn't go out and go to other wards, Northwest. We didn't do that. And so it was really interesting. You know, I'm thinking the big chair was like another place. Little did I know that right over the 11th Street Bridge, 14th Street Bridge, that it was another.
So you have siblings?
I have 5 brothers and sisters, 6 brothers and sisters. Yes.
Really? Mm-hmm. What's that like? What's that coming up?
I'm the middle child.
Really?
And so, you know, it was interesting because at one point when we all got separated, my grandmother took some of us. My sister went to live with my aunt. We didn't grow up together.
Okay.
We ended up separating, and we came back together as in our late teens and early 20s, and we are inseparable. I mean, I love.
So
my
y'all
family.
close?
Oh my goodness, yes,
Wow,
very
that's
close.
beautiful. Yeah. When I got to DC, '87, the first thing I noticed, I mean, off the Amtrak, was all these black folks at Union Station. It was like, it was the chocolate city. I got here, it was the
chocolate city.
Yeah.
Lovely.
So were you into go-go?
I love go-go. I was in a go-go band, you know.
Get out of here. You in a go-go band?
I was in a go-go band. My brother was a percussionist in a go-go band.
Really?
My brother Lance, my brother Terrence played keyboard in a go-go band. I knew Chuck Brown for years. In fact, when I got married and, you know, to Simba, and you know Simba, and we had the bookstores with Yao, Chuck Brown used to come and do his CD signings there, and so we got to really know him. And he fell in love with Layla at the time. He was really young then. I love go-go music. In fact, I incorporated some go-go music in a few records that I did over the years.
Wow. So as long as I've known you, you've always had this radiance that emanated from you, this glow. Is that why they call you Sunny?
It is.
Really?
So my father, I'll never forget this. I was 8 years old, and I was always in the garden with my grandmother, and I always loved everything. I would find a rose would be so beautiful.
Wow.
You know, taking the trash out would be great because you hear the birds in the morning. I just don't know where that comes from, but that's how I've always lived my life. So when I was in a band in New York, when I moved to New York, the leader of the band said, "You are sunshine. Your name is going to be Sunny."
Really?
So at the age of 18 is when I became Sunny.
Really?
Yes.
That
the
is,
world knows now.
That is what, you see that? Wow, that's beautiful. So how'd you start singing? What's your upbringing with singing?
I started in the church, Catholic church, and then I was in in 5th grade. I joined the choir and started singing a lot. And 4 doors down from me, Kevin Toney moved in.
Really? Oh, all this history right here.
Kevin Toney moved in, and I started babysitting his son Jason, and became very good friends with his wife Phyllis, and they became my family.
Really?
Yes, and to this day I adore them. And so we spent a lot of time up at their house, and music was always at the Toney house. I mean, Ray Parker would come over, the Blackbirds would come over, Toomey would come over. These were people that were a generation ahead of us. But that's who I grew up with listening to, just kicking it in the house.
Wow.
And so I said, I think I want to do this. And so I auditioned for Duke Ellington School of the Performing Arts, and I went there and started studying with Monica O'Tall.
Okay.
And I wasn't one of the students that could do academics and music for a full day, because it was a very long day. So I ended up not graduating from there. I graduated from Oxon Hill.
Okay.
Also, I should give it up to Georgetown Visitation, because I went to Georgetown Visitation.
All right now.
And then I knew I wanted to do it, so my dad said, "Look, don't major in music at Howard." I'd gotten a full scholarship. He said, "Don't major in music at Howard, because you don't know what you're going to do with that." So I got
a full scholarship? You said that real? You got a full scholarship?
I got a full scholarship.
To go to Howard?
But I didn't major in music. I majored in accounting.
Wow.
I majored in accounting because I wanted to
do
the right thing.
Make some money?
My father said do something practical,
Yeah,
and
I
the
got you.
practical voice always speaks to me. But then I spent most of the time in fine arts.
Yeah. So before we get to Howard, because you went to Duke Ellington School of the Arts, I didn't know that. Okay. What was it like? Because I went to a performing arts school in Philadelphia. We got a lot in common. I went to the Creative and Performing Arts. I was in school with Christian McBride,
Oh,
Joey DeFrancesco, Boys the Men,
I can't even imagine what
The
that
Roots,
must have been like.
Questlove. It was unbelievable. We had all kinds of talent. I mean, it was like a performing arts school was like.
No, it's unlike no other.
Yeah. And was it like that? At
It
the Duke Ellington
was,
School?
it was great. Michelle and Deggiocello, Dave Chappelle. I mean, it was just you were in school with these
Yeah.
amazing artists that went on to do incredible things, and then some of us who are doing fantastic things, like yourself, myself, in the performing arts field.
Yeah.
And there's a wonderful opportunity, I think, as a teenager to learn about the world through the arts.
Yes,
That
yes, no
is
doubt.
unique.
No doubt.
And so I'm grateful for that time there, for that.
Yeah, because, I came up in a single mother. I didn't know any, all I did was follow my path. I try to tell people, I played on street corners for 10 years.
I remember.
Yeah. All I did was follow my passion, and it led me. It was like I found something that I loved. At the age of 10, it led me to, I went to Catholic school, and after 8th grade, I went to high school. So that's what led me to the performing arts. And then I came to Howard because I heard a teacher paid for me to come up here and visit the university, and I heard the jazz ensemble. I heard Kevin Levi.
Kevin Levi.
And Kevin was that boy used to have me crying. He was nothing but the truth.
He was the truth.
He was nothing, and he was a great big brother to me. So great mentor, and so. But back to you. So, what got you into jazz? I mean, were you into jazz? Were you into jazz when you first heard it, or how did you get into jazz?
So I was listening to popular music like everybody else. But when I would do my grandmother's hair, she would play Sarah Vaughan.
She played Sarah Vaughan? Okay.
And I loved her voice. And so I think that was the plant. I know that was the planting of the seed there.
Wow.
And so when it came to study at Howard, music business is what I ended up majoring in, but I minored in jazz voice.
Okay.
And I just started doing, research papers. I mean, we did a lot of that at Howard, as you know. So I would do research papers on Ella, on Billy, on Sarah, and learn about their lives. And I think what really inspired me is how they lived, how they traveled around the world
Really?
performing jazz, and how the stories they told about jazz being an international language, or an art form that brought people together, and how they met people from all over the world, and they had found out that they had a common, humanity about them.
Yes.
That really resonated with me as a person that grew up predominantly around black people.
So you always loved music, period.
I always loved music.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
So was it at Howard that you really got into jazz?
I think so. I think it was at Howard, but I tell you, I didn't think I was going to be a jazz singer. I will say that. I moved to New York, and my producer, who's one of my best friends today, Morris Landy, I was going to do R&B.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I was going to do R&B, but then you know who I met?
Who?
Roy Hargrove.
There we go.
I met Roy.
Yeah. And
Everything changed.
Yeah. So we came up in that Young Lions period, which was really, I'm gonna say it. I would love to do a documentary on that period because it's a period that, that I don't know if they know about. It was just a special period.
Magical.
Yeah, I remember being and Winton kind of led it. And I remember seeing Winton when I was in high school. He would come to Philly, and I met Roy Hargrove in high school as well. We were at the downbeat competition in Chicago, and Roy started playing. Everybody turned around. I mean, he
was born to do that.
It was just a beautiful thing. And then when we were on campus, I think Spike Lee had the Mo Better Blues movie that came out, so that it just brought a certain, energy. It was a certain energy at that time.
That's right. And I think Spike was a catalyst for that because Terrence Blanchard was able to do a lot of music that, jazz became prominent in Spike's movies. You also had the M-Bass crew with Cassandra and Steve Coleman and that crew that was doing some good things. But really, it was Christian and Roy and Antonio Hart.
Yeah, Antonio Hart.
And, so many other just great jazz lions, as you mentioned, that just were powerhouses. I mean, they were coming out. They were, sounding larger than life at such a young age.
Yeah. So you moved to New York. You were living in New York?
I lived in New York.
Was this during Howard? How did that?
It was in the middle. So I went to New York and then came back and finished my degree.
Oh wow, I didn't know that. Yeah.
It was.
What was New York? You were living it. So were you out on the scene?
I was out on the scene, playing. Doing mostly recording, studio work. So I did jingles with the B.B. Winings, for example.
Really?
I did LaToya Jackson's record as background singer. I would do studio work.
Really?
I became very good friends with Gordon Chambers because I spent a little bit of time at Essence.
Wow.
So you talk about a varied life.
Yeah.
And so Gordon and I then would do music together. But Morris, I did a lot of recordings with Morris Landy, who's a great producer and a great music industry person in the record industry. And then I was on the road with a gospel musical called Mama Don't.
Okay.
And that was with the Clark Sisters, Cheryl Pepsi Riley. And I came back, and that day I walked into SOB's, and Roy Hargrove and Walter Sapp came over to me and said, hey. And I was talking to them, and Ed Bradley comes up to us and says, I have no idea who they are, by the way. Ed Bradley comes over and says, Roy Hargrove, man, I love you. Uh-huh. You inspire me so much. Everything changed after I started listening to you. And I'm thinking, who is this guy? Yeah. So I spent the next 6 months hanging out with Walter, Sapp, and Roy. Anytime Roy was in town, we hung out. In the village, we would sing. He was a singer.
Yeah.
So we would sing up and down the street. We'd come up with harmonies. It was so much fun. And then one day he sat me down, and I got to know Christian during that time too. Mm-hmm. And one day he sat me down and he said, you should go back to Howard.
Roy said that?
Mm-hmm. He said, you should go back to Howard. He says, because there's a lot that you can learn from school, and you'll be able to really communicate that language in the bandstand.
That is something I would never know that.
The next day I called Dr. Dawkins.
Really? Mm-hmm. Wow, that is amazing.
Yeah. I called him. He said, can I come back? He said, I was back in school in a month. I was. Yeah.
So, in New York, were you going? So you were checking out the music while you were in New York?
I was checking out the music.
Because it was a vibe. It
was just sitting in. Just sitting in and checking out. I mean, I'd go in and sit in with. I wish that Christian and Antonio and Roy, that group, had stayed together longer, because that was a powerful group. I think Greg Hutcherson was on drums. Yeah. I'm trying to remember who was on piano.
It was Stephen Scott.
Stephen Scott. Yeah. That was just a great band. I would but also, there was so much other. Branford had a nice project at that time, and I used to go and listen to Branford a lot. I mean, the music, the period was so exciting. Cassandra. Yeah. Her work was brilliant.
Diane Reeves.
I saw Diane Reeves several times when I lived in New York, and she was just incredible. Yeah. I'm trying to remember who was her bass player. Who was her drummer? Billy Kels? Mm-hmm. Is he?
I wouldn't know.
Billy. I think it was Billy. Mm-hmm. Right, Billy? Anyway, she was extraordinary. Yeah. Also, Vanessa Rubin was living in New York at that time, and she was fantastic.
Was Nina Freeline? Was she out there?
She was still. I think she was still in North Carolina, but her project was just starting. She was just starting. But there were so many others. Again, Terrence Blanchard. He was soaring at that time.
So you got in New York. Not only were you into the vocal, you were into the instrumental as well.
I was into the scene.
Really?
I loved jazz.
And you know what I tell people?
And I love present.
And I tell people that jazz is not just the music. It's the culture. Just like hip hop. It's not just music. It's the energy. It's the, watching people. It's the personalities. It's, it's all that.
That's right.
That
It's
goes
seeing Abby and Mark Carey.
Yes.
And Michael
Betty
Bowie.
Carter.
It was Betty Carter. Oh my gosh, all of that. My first Betty Carter concert, I just couldn't believe it.
Wow.
It was on fire. I'm thinking, who is this woman?
Wow.
It was great.
So you came back to Howard.
Came back to Howard.
Okay. What was that like? I mean, so you came back with a new motivation, a new vision?
I came back with a new motivation and met you. And you were like
crazy.
the ever-ready battery.
Yeah.
You were like, ooh.
Yeah, I was. I couldn't help myself.
So it was nice to know you. I remember Avery Joseph. Remember Avery?
Yeah, I still see Avery.
Love Avery. Avery. Cherie was there at the time. Marcus
Raymond
Johnson,
Avery.
I think. Raymond was
Yeah, it was
there.
Chris Day.
Chris
Yeah,
Day.
it was just.
And in fact, when I came back, it was interesting. What is the R&B group that
Shy.
came? No, the other one.
Mint Condition?
Mint Condition.
Yeah, that's who Chris Day would go.
Okay, so
yeah.
let me just tell you my Mint Condition story.
Okay.
The first month I came back, I walk into the office and I'm trying to get my books, and Mint Condition's in the office. And they're leaving, and they've got all these books, and they're like, here, take our books. So I got...
Hold on. Where were you at?
This was in the fine arts school.
They were in fine arts?
They were in the administration office for some reason.
Wow.
Like 3 of them, not all of them, but like 3 of them were in there. And I was having a conversation about how I needed books. And so I don't even know which one of them, but they turned around and was like, we've got books.
Really?
So I got their,
Get out of here.
so I got their books. I didn't have to buy any books. Most books I didn't have to buy.
That is amazing.
So I got my books from Mint Condition, and that was fantastic. And then I just went about the business of really learning.
Yeah.
And Jerry Allen was there, and Grady Tate was there.
Yeah.
And
Jerry Allen and Grady Tate. Yeah. That's
And that
what
was-
else case. Yeah, that's it. I used to see you in the practice room, just
I just
working
lived.
here.
I just
Yeah.
had to live there.
Yeah, and
Just-
because I stayed, I lived there, but I used to see you in the practice room working and stuff out, so that experience of Howard, and another thing about DC, even though I didn't go to New York, those cats would come. They would come to DC. So Roy's band, they would always go to Blues Alley and somewhere, and Roy would come on campus. Roy
Yes,
had a
he
best
would.
friend named Sheldon.
Yes,
Sheldon Wright.
Yes.
Sheldon was and Roy would come on campus. And me and Roy just always had a kindred spirit. So like we just had a vibe, And so let me tell you a story. They used to have this thing called Jazz in a Punch Out. And they would have jazz and poetry. So one time, I think Kevin and Mark Batson is playing it. And I don't know if it was Mark Batson. It might have been. But anyway, we're in a punch out over in Blackburn Center playing. And out of nowhere, this was when Roy was at Berkeley. He comes in, Del Feo, Roy
yes,
Hargrove, Antonio Hart, all these cats come in from Berkeley. They just take their horns out, ain't asked to sit there, got on the stage and start bang, hitting.
That
And
must have been amazing.
we were like, oh, okay. So they just took our thing up. So, and Kevin, so we got our respect. Let me just say that.
I'm sure you did, Kevin Lee. Oh, yeah.
Let me tell you, man, Kevin, and I got to talk about Kevin, that's my boy. This cat had a sound. He had all the elements. He just, this big sound.
Huge sound.
And he just, big ears. And this was able to, I used to sit second alto. And I literally would go crying. I was just trying to, how you do that? I'm trying to get this, but he inspired me so much, Anyway, that's, so Howard was a great environment.
It is. I think no matter what school you're in, at Howard. There's nothing like the Mecca experience, as Ta-Nehisi Coates talks about. And it's so unique. And I really am grateful that I was able to spend that quality time at Howard.
And see, when I was I was the militant kind of cat.
Yes, you were.
I got a lot of love, but I was militant. I don't know if I'm militant now. But I used to go on camp. I used to hear Dr. Ben Yakimin. I used to go hear like live lectures. Dr. John Hendrick Clark.
Steve
Coakley. I knew Steve Coakley. I mean, it was just, I was getting a cultural revolution, all that.
That's what happens at Howard.
Yeah, and the music. And so Howard was very, I grew up at Howard,
I did too.
I'm just, I'm gonna tell you a story. Well, we're gonna talk about me. So we can talk about you. One thing I noticed about you.
You can tell me a story.
No. Do you have perfect pitch?
No.
But you have great ears.
I have great ears because I have a lot of instrumental friends that really taught me how to listen. And Jerry was instrumental in that.
Really?
Yeah, she would just tell me how important it was to always think about one. Where's one? And that'll really help me. I mean, I always knew when a piano was out of tune to hit it tuned, because if you have relative pitch and you tune it up to so that was just things that you learn over time that helps you to.
Also, another thing I noticed about you when I used to play with you, you had a great sense of time and rhythm.
I love it.
I noticed that.
I love it.
How'd you?
I love it. Because I love the drums. And I love to play with time. And so, just hanging out with Kevin, Tony, and just listening to those guys, Ray Parker, they just big, huge ears, and they loved rhythm. And so I always felt as a singer that rhythm had to play a role in singing. So,
okay. So I'm gonna ask you one more question.
Okay.
One more, and then we're gonna take a little break. And then go to the next part. You at one time were a hostess of BET, Bet on Jazz.
That's right.
Can you share how did that come about?
Well, I have to thank Waymer Johnson and Paxton Baker, and I think Willard may have had something to do with it.
Willard Jenkins?
I started as a guest host. And Angela and Stribling and I are friends to this day. That is my sister. I love her. And I started as a guest host, and someone said, you have a nice speaking voice. You should do this. And so I started, somebody just called me up and said, do you want a contract? So I ended up doing 32 shows for them. And
wow.
It changed everything. Spending a full day with B.B. King.
Wow. You spent a full day with...
A full day, and he was... He just instantly, you were family with him. He's got that Southern spirit about him. And he told me, any question I asked, he told long stories about them, so you got a chance to know him. And then he'd ask you questions too. He asked me about my mom and my upbringing in D.C. and why was I not doing music? Because he wanted to know, well, you're a musician, well, why are you talking to me? So he wanted to know that part of the story. He gave me his number afterwards and said, stay in touch. That was lovely. Rochelle Farrell was another person that I spent the full day with. And just
really? Wow.
Yes, that was an amazing day with her. And others, Herbie Hancock, that whole experience with him that day was really exceptional. Just the way that he thinks about music in the context of sharing and our humanity, and he talks about that. You could see it on the bandstand when he's sharing the stand with other members of the trio. It's really, he's an extraordinary.
Were you nervous when you? Or you just said, I can do this.
I've never been. The idea of nervousness has never really entered my being. So anything that I undertake, I've always felt like I'm just doing it.
Now we were talking prior to doing this. You said your work ethic. Okay, let's talk about that.
So my grandmother, God bless her, rest her soul, I know she is watching over me.
Come on now.
Eloise Sumter. She taught me a work ethic the moment I stepped into her home.
Really?
I was up early in the morning and went to bed late at night. I was polishing 117 pieces of silver. I was out in the garden at 6 o'clock in the morning tending the soil because she had a vegetable garden outside. You know, I was washing dishes every single day and drying them and making sure everything sparkled. And she just taught you how to have a level of detail to everything that you do. And I've always done that as a result. Every aspect of my work, there's been a certain level of detail. It's almost like my daughter's is a biology major, and she loves sciences and looking under a microscope. And I think that we both have that whole spirit of just, if you're going to do it well and do it right. And that's all Grandma.
Did you pass that down to your kids?
I hope so. You know,
we were
that's
talking about
another conversation.
I understand. But you know what? I'm an educator, so one thing I learned through teaching is like planting seeds. And, you know, you're not going to see the results immediate.
That's right.
But you gotta, you just plant the seed and let it marinate, and over time that stuff, it'll happen.
You know, I hope so. That generation is an entitled generation.
Oh God, you hear that, Elijah, Josiah,
Layla, Kobe.
Oh my, yes.
But they don't know it.
Yeah.
And I struggled growing up for a number of reasons, and I intentionally tried so that they did not have to struggle. And then I heard Michelle Singletary say the other day, kids need to struggle.
Yes.
And I'm thinking, why didn't I hear that 15 years ago?
Yeah. You think because I'm gonna give them what I didn't have, and you think, my friend, you know Munir.
Oh yeah, Munir.
He was saying his daughter, she got to travel to Africa and see how other people were living, and that kind of brought it home.
Oh yeah.
Sometimes, you know, when you, I remember I did a little tour and went to 7 countries in Africa, and just, it changed me. I got to sit in with Fela Kuti at the shrine, and it changed me because we take a lot for granted. And I was militant and all that, you know, and I said, whoa. It's really a blessing to be in a place where you can have free speech.
That's right.
Where you can express yourself, whether people are going to agree, you know. And when people talk about they from the hood, I've seen some hood. I've seen some stuff. And one thing I saw about that experience taught me is that even though they was in some real dire conditions, that they still had a spirit of hope and trying to, you know, that and trying to, you know, everybody has this innate desire for freedom. I think it's innate. You want, you know, so when I got back to the States, I began to look at my reality different, you know, and so a lot of times people need to travel and because you don't appreciate what you have until you lose it.
Until you go and you see other people's condition.
Yes.
Yes, absolutely.
So.
And for, you know, to grow up on Morris Road, my children know nothing about that life.
Yeah.
Nothing.
Yeah.
And in some ways, they should.
Yeah.
They should.
It's you know, we'll figure it out. They'll figure it out, you know. But so before we take our break, I just want what advice would you give young people, and in music or in general, like in terms of I know that work ethic is very important. So
I think having a strong work ethic about anything that you're passionate about is important. And as I always tell both of my children, there's 2 things: the power of choice. Be careful about your choices because you have to live with them.
Yes.
There is a very profound power in choosing.
Yes.
First. 2 is inspiration. What inspires you every day?
Yes.
To move.
Yeah.
And find out. It could be 1, 2, 3. It could be a dozen things in my case. But do what inspires you so that you can have a meaningful life, because life is incredibly complicated, and it's even more complicated now with the acceleration of social media and the internet and globalism and all these things.
So, well, we're going to keep doing what we do.
That's right. We can keep doing what we do. And I'm glad that you're doing what you do.
Oh, thank you, darling. I so appreciate. You know, it's funny. I've learned so, just sitting here talking, and this is why this is what this is about, because there's a part when I was doing some research, I said, "Wow, I thought I knew Sunny."
We've known each other for 30 years.
Wow, and I'm just, you know, and you learn, and I'm like, wow, this lady is the truth. She's the truth. Anyway, we're gonna take a break. I'm just, you know, and we have a little part on the end,
Okay.
and we're going to finish up, and so we'll be right back.
Great.
So this is a conversation in jazz with Sunny Sumter. We'll be right back.